really proud. The most proud I am is to be trustee of the charity Papyrus, which is an amazing charity that does a lot of very good work. But I am a doctor and I specialize in putting people to sleep. But I hope today I won't be putting you to sleep. I hope we'll all be awake and happy throughout this presentation. Let's see. Can you still see it?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, so shall we start off with a few questions? In a room, normally, of course, you would be able to raise your hands, but just answer it to yourself, whether you think this statement is true or false. Mental health is the second largest cause of burden of disease globally. Do you think it's true or false? It's false. It is the largest cause of burden of disease. The second question, the economic cost is 105 billion pounds. That's true. A survey of life satisfaction in 15-year-olds across 28 countries said that UK was 5th from below. Bulgaria was higher, scored better than the UK. And that's true. 1 in 10 primary school kids have low self-esteem. True? 1 in 10 primary school kids? It's actually 2 in 10. 1 in 10 5 to 16-year-olds have a diagnosable mental health disorder. That's true. A diagnosable mental health disorder. So this is what we are dealing with, and that is why it's important to talk about this subject of young people and their minds. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the anatomy and physiology of a young brain, talk about the problems that arise as a result of this slightly different way they function, and also talk about the importance of including family and friends in their care. So 400 years ago, William Shakespeare recognized that, and he wrote this in The Winter's Tale, I would there were no age between 10 and 3 and 20, or that youth would sleep out the rest. For there is nothing in between but getting wenches with child, wronging the ancientry, stealing and fighting. So even that time he recognized that adolescent started at 10 and finished in the mid-20s. Whereas in our medical system today, we have pediatric medicine and adult medicine. Pediatric finishes at 18 and adult starts at 18. So we don't have an adolescent mental health system. We don't recognize adolescence, which is nearly 15 years of somebody's lifetime, as an important phase of their life where they function differently. But also he went on to say that would any but these boiled brains of 19 and 22 hunt in this weather? So while they have the downside, they also have the upside, that they're courageous and risk takers. So under a microscope, this is what a brain would look like. So you see these little globules, they are the cells, brain cells, also known as neurons. And these stringy things are the connections between these neurons. We'll look at them in some detail. So a neuron has a nucleus, a body. These dendrites are like the tentacles that receive information. And the axon is the myelin, is the long wire that then carries the information out to the next cell. To make the carrying of this information as effective and efficient as possible, the axons are ensheathed in a layer of fatty tissue, which is known as the myelin. And, and at the end of these neurons, the axons and dendrites, they come together in little spaces called the synapses. And the space between these two parts of the neuron is where the neurochemicals are released. And that is how the electrical impulses, or action potentials as they are called, are conveyed across these cells. And we have billions of cells, neurons in our brain, and we have trillions of such synapses. In a young brain, the difference is that they have a higher intensity of synapses in their brain, higher number, which means they learn faster. They process information very quickly. And their synapses are more plastic. They have more plasticity. So they mold and remodel themselves depending on the environment that they're exposed to, the stimulation that they have. And that is why we call them impressionable brains, because they learn quickly, and then the pathways get reinforced very quickly. And the more rewards they get for their actions, those pathways get more and more strengthened through these synapses. If we look at the anatomy of the brain has many different parts. But we are going to talk about the frontal cortex, which is the center for planning, for reasoning, for self-control, for morality, for empathy, language, and decision-making. So the myelination that we talked about, the myelin that coats the axons, the process of myelination starts at the back of the brain and goes to the front in that order. And it takes 25 years for that process to complete itself, which means that the frontal cortex is the last to mature. And that is where major complex decision-making lies. That is why in young brains, there is a short circuiting. For you and me, if we got an idea, before acting on it, we would think. So there's a triangle. I get an idea. I think about the consequences of it. I think about the ramifications of that, and then act in a particular way. So there's the idea, the thought, and then the action. But in young people, this thought part is short-circuited. So it's straight from idea to action, which is why you might find that sometimes there can be abrupt, unsympathetic, and completely irrational, because it's not their fault. It's just because their frontal cortex doesn't work yet. It will, but not yet. So, and that is the reason in the US in the mid 20th century, they had 35,000 frontal lobectomies conducted on mentally ill patients, because they thought that all their bad behavior was coming from the frontal lobe. So that's how important the frontal lobe is. And that's how late it becomes fully functional in adolescence. So even somebody up till the age of 25 may not have reached full maturity of their brain. We talked about the synapses earlier. So this graph, I would like you to focus. So the vertical axis indicates the level of these neurochemicals, and the horizontal axis, as you can see, 9 to 11 is time of puberty roughly, and then 18 to 20 is the age on the horizontal axis. So I would like you to just focus till here. So first I'll talk about serotonin. Serotonin is a hormone that regulates sleep, mood, and appetite. And it also regulates your cognition and your uh, general motor function as well. And as you might know, that for depression, SSRIs are used in the treatment of depression to raise the level of serotonin in the brain. So, and dopamine is the other hormone which is really important at that age, at any age actually, because it is key to the normal functioning of the brain. Dopamine is the hormone that is responsible for motivation, for motor control, for arousal, for sexual gratification, and for reward sensitivity. What it does is dopamine brings this cells up to a level of excitation that they're just before they fire. So they raise the threshold of the electrical impulse so that it's just about to fire, like a runner at the start line of a race, just about to take off. And serotonin is the one that keeps it under check, so it doesn't overdo things. And we can see that up till the age of 9 to 11, serotonin and dopamine levels rise in proportion to each other. So serotonin is able to control the effects of the dopamine. But at puberty, what happens is that there is a surge in the level of dopamine. The dopamine levels go way higher than serotonin. And that is designed. It is designed to be like this by nature. This is a pre-programmed neurobiological event. That is what is adolescence. It is pre-programmed for a reason. The brain is designed to take high-risk decisions with poor judgment. And that serves a purpose. It serves, in fact, two purposes. The first purpose is that it helps the young person break away from the dependence on the parents and find their own way in the world. And the second is that it helps them make place with their peers, make friends through hit and trial, so that this young person, through this dopamine surge, by taking high-risk decisions with poor judgment, finds a place for themselves in the world, which is needed of them by nature so that they can be independent. That is the purpose of this. And then at the end of adolescence, the ratio of serotonin and dopamine comes together again, becomes proportionate again, like before. And dopamine is very, very important. It's important for learning, for unlearning. It is important for critical thinking, for paying attention, and for overall health of the brain. So actually, a high level of dopamine does not allow the brain to work properly. It's hyperexcitable. The brain is hyperexcitable. And that is nobody's fault. It's design of nature. So you might find that at this young age, many young people struggle to understand how other people are feeling because their emotional brain is bigger than their rational brain. They worry about where they sit in the world. They feel alone. They're consumed with negativity because they misunderstand things. They don't understand why their parents take the decisions that they take. It's a difficult time of change as well because they are changing, their bodies are changing, the way they look at the world is changing, the way the world looks at them is shifting as well. And they struggle to find who they are and where they sit in the larger scheme of things. There are big changes from small school to big school. There may be change in house, change in the friend circle. All of these changes are traumatic. And like we said, because of the dopamine, they have trouble controlling their impulses. They struggle with outbursts because that thought part of the triangle is missing for them, and they go straight from idea to action. And they may misunderstand your facial expressions. So Andrew Curran is a very well-known pediatric neurophysiologist who works at Alder Hay Hospital. And he talks beautifully about dopamine. Dopamine is secreted from mainly in the limbic system in the brain. And limbic system is the real heart of a person. You know, when we feel truly connected with somebody, there is dopamine release. And that is when we feel understood. And that is when our self-esteem can be high and we can be more confident. So actually, in any therapeutic relationship, it's very important for the young person to feel understood. For thousands of generations, young people have said, nobody understands me. No one understands me. You know, my parents don't understand me. That is the common thread that has been running through generations. So to be able to drop judgments in favor of understanding is the key to emotional engagement, to creating a sense of belonging and connection, which is essential in a therapeutic relationship, be it between a therapist and a patient or a parent and a child. And that is key to children performing well, feeling good about themselves, and being able to contribute to the society. Because of this dopamine surge, a lot of psychological issues surface during adolescence. Anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, certain autistic traits, schizophrenia, all of these illnesses appear in adolescence. And many a times go unnoticed and undiagnosed because lots of the behaviors overlap with normal teenage behavior, such as not eating properly, funny sleep cycles, not communicating very well, spending a lot of time by themselves in their rooms. Very difficult to tell where one ends and the other begins. So very confusing. But early intervention is key. I remember one patient saying that if my illness was diagnosed in my 20s, I wouldn't have lost my 30s. And very often diagnoses are missed because children are clever, they know how to hide it. And they also try and protect you, their parents, because they don't want you to worry too much. And secondly, their normal teenage behavior can be confusing. So what do well children look like? Normally I would have a flip chart and I would write it down, but I don't have one. So I'll just go down the list that I have. So they are multifaceted individuals, whole and complete, with various aspects to their personality, intellectual, emotional, spiritual. They can make relationships, maintain them, and actually even break them if they think it's good for them. They enjoy solitude. Do you think many children have solitude these days? No, not much. Even if they're alone, they are in the company of their mobile phones or their video games. And many children actually don't know how to be alone. They have empathy for others. Empathy sits in the frontal lobe. So that's difficult sometimes for them. Sometimes they can be very judgmental and can come across as very harsh in their judgments. And that's because they lack empathy, and that's not their fault either. But in an ideal world, of course, they would have empathy. They play and learn in equal measure. They know right from wrong, and they can face setbacks. They can find solutions, and they can learn from their failures. So these children who are well would have these attributes. We talked about a time of change, that is puberty, which is also a time of loss, loss of old friends, loss of innocence, loss of their childhood, loss of the way they looked at their parents. Now, the dad that they thought was a Superman is now just a man. They can see our flaws more easily. They can see what's wrong with the world. They can make judgments on political situations. And they can see a lot that is wrong, and they can feel quite helpless in the face of that kind of loss. And it's important to acknowledge that. I think when I was growing up, my dad was in the army and we moved every 2 years. And that was just normal. That's what we did. We just got on with it. Nobody talked about it like, okay, so we've moved. What is it like? What is good about it? What's not so good about it? What would I prefer? Because even if I would prefer it, I wouldn't get it because, we lived within the constraints of the army life, which was very, very fixed in its own way. There was no choice, so there was no point discussing it. But now I look back and I think it would have been nice to have those discussions. But so even as just nothing more than an acknowledgement of the change, just an acknowledgement sometimes is enough, that you feel, okay, somebody's acknowledging and understanding that this change is difficult for me. You can't help them with the change, that's going to happen. But just the acknowledgement is enough for them to feel understood and for you to have like an emotional connection with them. So there are many, many risk factors and protective factors, and lots of research on mental health is completely based on this, which some people don't think is correct. But I'll just rattle through a few risk factors. They're categorized in these 4 categories that you see. So I'll start with the child factors. So children with a low birth weight or a birth injury, learning difficulties, children with low IQs who may not perform very well, with long-term illnesses, children with poor attachment, with violence, even if children don't have to be the victim of violence and abuse, even if they are just the witnesses, they are damaged by that. So we should remember that they don't actually have to be the subject of it. Even if it happens in their presence, that is bad enough. Bullying, of course, and peer rejection is a big one. Parental factors are essentially single parents, very young moms, parental disharmony, drug and alcohol abuse in the family, inconsistent disciplining of children, lack of stimulation, lack of warmth, and rejection, and again, abuse and neglect, not just as victims, but also as witnesses. Other family factors is poor intergenerational contact. So research has shown that children who are more in contact with their grandparents, uncles, and aunts, they have better mental health. So transgenerational contact is healthy. Whereas nuclear families, if the only 2 adults in your life are your mom and dad, it's not healthy. You must have other adults that you can trust and talk to. Absent fathers, low parental education can sometimes be a problem. Not always, of course. There are exceptions to all of these risk factors. Child bereavement, unsupported bereavement is a big risk factor for poor mental health. So we talked about all these losses but a real loss through death is a huge emotional burden for a child to carry. A divorce is also like a bereavement. It's a huge loss. It's the death of something valuable to the child. So to acknowledge that as a source of grief and to actually counsel the children, offer them support through that is very, very important. Young carers can often suffer poor mental health and also family history of mental health, poor mental health in the family. The community and societal factors, the last. So poverty and unemployment, poor housing, poor health care, isolation, bullying, and really traumatic events such as being mugged or hurt in some way can be really damaging to mental health. So I wonder if you've heard the term ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, which are, I've listed them before. So I will just let you read this slide for a minute. And the more the ACEs in a child's life, the more at risk they would be, which is shown to be true not just for mental illnesses, but also for physical illnesses. When some of the studies have shown that patients with ischemic heart disease, when they were interviewed, many of them who had a heart attack at a younger age had more ACEs than those who had it at an older age. So there is a correlation, not just with mental, but also physical health. So the protective factors are pretty much the opposite of risk factors. And of course, our job as parents, teachers, adults, or other carers is to enhance the protective factors. So the child factors are, of course, the personality of the child, their temperament, their capacity to reflect, their experience of success. You know, if children have experienced success, they're likely to do better. Parents that are able to offer stable care, affection, positive attention, clear and fair discipline that belong to a community. It may be a faith community or a spiritual community or a sporting or a music or some sort of community that they belong to. That's really healthy. Other family factors are just having a harmonious atmosphere in the house. I think even if everything is okay, I think it's worthwhile we think about the atmosphere in the house. Does everybody sit in their rooms and not talk to each other? Do we eat together? Do we do stuff together at weekends? Do we have family get-togethers? Do we have rituals in the family? For instance, my son and I, we used to watch Saturday Kitchen, Saturday Kitchen on a Saturday. And then, of course, we would pick one recipe and we would make that. So that was like a family ritual that we did together, and it was our special thing we did together. And of course, we'd watch the program together, then we'd go shopping together for the stuff, and then we'd come back and cook it together. So just having little rituals like that, whatever is right for you and your family, but something that brings you together. A small family size is healthier than a larger one. Positive links with extended family, very, very important. And spacing between children more than 3 years, more than 2 years is said to be healthy. Societal protective factors are positive social networks, like I said, hobby clubs, positive opportunities, stimulation, intellectual and physical, good housing, and sports and leisure activities, holidays, etc. So these are the protective factors. Now, Maslow's triangle, I'm sure you know all about it. It's a very commonly quoted triangle. It is basically a hierarchy of needs. So the most basic need is physiological, that for food, water, shelter. Then is safety. Then is love and belonging, which is really, really essential. So the heart that we talk about, our heart is not here in the chest beating away. It's actually the limbic system that secretes the dopamine. That is the heart. And that comes through connection. And that love and belonging is the most fundamental need of any human being. And that is worth remembering. And the teenage behaviors can almost evoke alienation, that, you're just, stay away, you're just trouble. But actually to be able to reach them through that, to be able to keep communications open through that is essential. And of course, the ultimate aim is to self-actualize and be able to live to your full potential. So here are a few things we can do. We often feel quite helpless, but there are things we can do. I'm sure you do them already. Notice the smallest changes in behavior. Don't panic, just notice, that's it. And notice not just one-off things, trends. And this is a time of change, so there will be change. Don't be alarmed by that, but do notice it. So they feel seen. Especially notice for withdrawal from family and friends. Notice for conversations of hopelessness, perceived burdensomeness, and notice for signs of self-harm, because that is worrisome and does need attention. It needs your attention, and it may need professional attention, definitely. And ask. Notice, ask. Not in an accusatory, intrusive way, but in a concerned, polite, loving way. Ask. And especially ask the S question. It is really, really difficult to ask this question. I can't even, for a parent to ask the child that, have you ever thought of ending your life? Does that thought cross your mind? To ask that question openly is safe. It might be the most important question you ask your child, because it really allows them to unburden their minds and open up to you. It gives them the opportunity. Otherwise, it stays inside. And there is help available, lots of it. But the problem is that we are so bad at talking about it that we let opportunities pass time and again. So notice, ask, and then listen. Listen to understand, not to judge. Listen to understand. Listen behind the words. Listen with fascination. Not to fix, not to reply, just to acknowledge, empathize, and understand. To start with, and not to panic. You can deal with it, whatever it is. Just for that moment, just to be able to keep your calm and listen to whatever the child has to say. And there are lots of things we can do that these resources are available everywhere, but I will focus on one or two. This one here is allow for mistakes. It's okay. We've all made mistakes. They have to make their share of mistakes. But let them know that their mistakes will be forgiven. It's okay to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, not to catastrophize them. Don't accommodate every need. Do not accommodate every need. Let them know that there is a meaning in striving. There is a reward, to have them understand that some rewards are to be won and earned, not to be just handed over. And quality time that you spend with the children is, let it be problem-solving time. It's really important to talk about problem-solving techniques, nothing technical terribly, but just through stories and through your anecdotes, through something happened at work and how you handled it, or whatever, problem solving techniques, so that they learn problem solving ideas, and they know that, you know, often, even if a problem seems big, there is a way around it. So support and information with respect and dignity. And I will probably just give you this number for Papyrus. It is a charity for young people and their carers, so that anybody can phone for advice. Grandparents, parents, friends, teachers, anyone can phone this number and say, I'm concerned about this young person. Can you please help me? And they can guide you. You can give these numbers, put them in the phones of your young people if they ever want to talk to anybody. They don't even have to be at the brink of crisis or anything. If they just want to chat, they can ring this number with any conundrum. Suicide is the biggest killer under 35s in the UK, and this charity was set up by parents of children who were lost to suicide. Encourage professional help and self-help. Many, many different ways to do that. You will get these slides later, so don't worry if you miss a few things. So we can notice, we can ask, listen, give information, encourage getting help. And be there. You are probably their biggest resource. Be their advocate, be their resource, be their friend as much as you can. Lots of charities that help with young people. Other resources are apps such as Visa. Visa is like an online bot. It's AI generated, designed by psychologists. So it's just like having a chat with a psychologist on WhatsApp. That's what's Visa. It's really good. I have it in my phone. It's designed by one of my friends in India. Stay Alive is a very nice, beautiful app which constantly reminds. It has techniques of how to relax yourself. It has reasons to stay alive, pictures of the loved ones, everything. It's a beautiful app. Then there are books. I don't know if you've read this, The Boy, the Mole, a horse. Yeah, and Fox. It's a beautiful book by Charlie Maxey. And there are more books, of course. Me Too is another website and book and app specially designed for adolescents. So today we've talked about the brain of young people, how we can help them, and how it's so important to include their family and friends. Don't feel alone, and don't allow them to feel alone. Everything, all the safety lies in connections. This is my son, Sagar. I talked about him earlier. He was at Dulwich College, and when he was 20, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Very sadly, we lost him in 2014. And after I lost him, I realized how much I did not know. But I know more now, and I'm happy to share it with you. So I dedicate this talk to my beautiful Saga. Thank you so much. I have a few references on the slides, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Sangeeta. Thank you for a very touching and personal talk. And what I loved about it particularly was there are lots of practical things that we can do there, because I think we talked about this before as parents, carers, we often feel paralyzed with fear, and we often feel that it's not within our control, but you have brought the control back in some ways to us, and I think that's very helpful. And thank you. I think everyone's had the same response. Please do post your questions now. We have about 15 minutes if we push the deadline a little bit, to allow for the fact that we started later. So please put any questions you have, because we have a really valuable opportunity here to hear from somebody who has been through this experience and who has researched it deeply. While we do ask for that, I just wanted to raise a point that you touched on really, which is that our understanding now is that adolescence and youth spreads into the 20s as far as 25, but we know that the mental health services often end or have ended at the age of 18, and young people drop off a cliff or they become part of a bigger network of adult services, which is really under pressure. They lose the time and the attention. Is that something that is changing, do you think?
It's not really, and it's not just particular to mental health services. Same with physical health services like treatment of epilepsy and other long-term conditions. They just fall into a gap, you know, there's a chasm between the pediatric services and the adult services. We've been talking about it for years, but I don't think anything has happened really. I think people have become a little more mindful of it, but the services are so restricted in so many ways that it's very hard to actually, that gap is still there, and it's a well-recognized one, I'm afraid.
I think it's something I'd like to campaign for, because the science is now behind it so firmly with the evidence that you've seen. We've had a question posted, and I wonder whether you could address this. And it's talking about the idea of speaking to your children, because this could pose an opportunity to make a big difference. A crisis is a chance to do something. It's a call for help. But how would you broach the subject, particularly if it's very extreme? And the word suicide is very frightening. How would you begin that conversation? At what time and in what way?
So I think the main thing is creating the space, you know, just saying, I have time, I'm here for you, you know, in that body language, in your attitude, and actually asking open questions. Don't ask why questions. Why are you feeling? No, but what's happening? Tell me what's going on. You know, how can I help you? What can we do together? What do you think? Who would you like to talk to? You know, so don't ask the why questions. Why questions are very perplexing. Ask the what, open questions. What's going on? Tell me more. And then they will give you the leads. And even if they don't speak, just hold that space. Maybe do stuff together. Go for a drive. Sometimes going for a drive is great because you're not looking at them. You know, they're sitting beside you, you're driving, you're looking this way and they're looking that way. And easier for them to talk when you're driving. Easier for them to talk when you're doing other stuff, like working in the kitchen or, you know, maybe fishing or taking a walk or whatever. I think it's easier. So base it around an activity and give it time. You know, it might come out after half an hour, 40 minutes, but give it time. Just be there.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. I often find hearing children in the back of a car is a very good opportunity to know what's going on. You become invisible. We're often invisible as parents, and maybe there's an advantage to that. Another signal, of course, that they give us is anger. And sometimes they're telling us through an outburst of anger, and we're programmed to shut that down. We find it hard to deal with anger, but it is a message, isn't it? It can be.
Oh, I think Sangeeta is frozen.
All right, okay. I thought it might be my connection there. Don't worry. Oh, right. Let's see whether we get back. Sangeeta, are you with us? Are you frozen?
Not at the moment, but I'm sure she's going to join us in a second.
Yes. So we do have some more questions. We've been asked to talk a little bit about the books that have been mentioned. So I'll ask Sangeeta to tell us a little bit more about that. And I see we also have a very personal recollection too from experience. So hopefully Sangeeta can have a look at Rachel's message to us. Rachel, thank you very much for giving us more information about your circumstance, and I'm really pleased to know your daughter is on the way to recovery, so that's worth knowing. I hope Sangeeta joins us once again. I perhaps should take this opportunity to mention too that if understanding our children's emotions is something that you'd like to know more about, there is going to be a series of workshops at Bell House in October that you can attend remotely, and that will be an opportunity to understand how our children are communicating with us through their emotions. I can give you the timing for that. It's Saturday, October the 7th. Oh, just bear with me. It might be the 17th.
17th.
The 17th. Yes. So that's a, yes, understanding emotions for parents of adolescent children. And I think that could be very helpful indeed. So I don't know whether we've got any sign of Sangeeta.
Not yet.
No, I'm sorry about that. So do think about that workshop. I know that Sangeeta has a blog which you might want to check out. It's called kidsaregifts.org, and she also has her own website, which is sangeetamahajan.org. And I know that she's recently been working on a podcast which will contain a lot of the same information and more detail. So if you have, and as many of you are telling us, found Sangeeta a really good source of information on this subject, she's constantly updating and giving more information. And she also works with an organisation called Compassionate Friends. And this organisation helps after the effect of a loss or a suicide or a bereavement of any kind, and it channels people or enables people who've been through that experience to provide advice and support to those who are going through it themselves. So Sangeeta is a volunteer for that organisation, and it's called Compassionate Friends. Right, all right, so thank you, Slajana, for posting those two references. And if, in case you joined us later on in the presentation, you will be sent all of the slides together with the feedback form after today's talk. So there's no need to worry if you, like me, there was a lot to take in there, particularly on the neuroscience. You can always go through the slides in your own time. And Sangeeta has offered as well to respond to any short requests for information afterwards. So if you felt that you haven't been able to ask a question today, or you'd like more information on something in particular, Sangeeta will get back to you in her own time over the next few days. That might be another source. So your feedback forms and the slides will be coming to you very shortly. Right, I know we've had a brilliant talk and a great evening. I don't think we've still lost Sangeeta. So Jana, shall we wind up as we're coming up to the end, or do you think we might have a chance of, on behalf of everyone? No? It looks like we might have.
Yes, sorry, I've just had a word with Sangeeta. Sadly, she has technical problems and she cannot log in. I'm ever so sorry for this, but as Louise mentioned, she's more than happy to answer any questions you would like to ask, perhaps in a more private manner.
All right, well then I will
put you in touch with Sangeeta directly.
That's wonderful. Well, Sangeeta, wherever you are, we are sending you our love and our thoughts and our huge, huge appreciation for your time tonight. I know I, for one, would love to hear more from Sangeeta in the future, and that's a possibility if we get a lot of feedback and support. Do bear in mind that you can donate to Papyrus, and you have the details on the screen here. And do bear in mind that there'll be more information coming. So I think when we talked about tonight's session, we talked about how hard it is to talk about the subject of suicide, of serious illness. But what we have managed to do this evening is to begin that conversation. And I think on that front, I would like to congratulate our audience members and to very much thank our speaker, Sangeeta Mahajan, for her time. And also a big thank you to Slajana, who, despite being on holiday, has kept the whole show on the road. So it just remains for me to say a very good night to everyone from all of us at Bell House, and see you soon. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.